Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. We appreciate you being here every single Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You are with us on YouTube.com and Facebook.com, both / WakeUpCallDT, on WakeUpCallDT.podbean.com as well. Internet streaming, TV, and radio all throughout the world, across the globe, on Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Once the shows go live, they jump into the archives, and you will find us on Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, iTunes and Apple Podcasts, Player FM, Podbean, Podchaser.com, Podvine, Spotify, TuneIn, and YouTube, amongst others. And all you have to do is search on any one of these channels, Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, or one word, Wake Up Call DT. And a big time thanks to our incredible partners that you can visit in Central and Upstate New York: Carvel DeWitt, the Wildcat Sports Pub, Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory, GG Cards and Breaks, Canine Camp Dog Daycare, Avicoli's, Canine Campground Dog Boarding, Chick-fil-A Cicerone, Chick-fil-A Clay, Mother's Cupboard, Great Lakes Honda City, Pizza Man, and of course, we are the exclusive multimedia marketing partner of the Lemoyne College Dolphins, the Bryan and Stratton College of Syracuse Bobcats, and the Binghamton University Bearcats. With that being said, here on the show, I am honored and so very privileged to have the opportunity to speak with every single year Mr. Bob Holliday. Bob Holliday coming to us with many years of experience in the broadcasting world, in the writing world as well, and of course WRALSportsFan.com, where a ton of his work can be seen and celebrated over these many years. With that being said, I am so privileged to bring him back onto the show to speak on the ACC, which we do every single year. So let's bring in the man of this portion of Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora to round out the week, right before we head into the Final Four and the championship game, Mr. Bob Holliday. Bob, how are you?
Dude, I'm doing well. I've been around a while, watching Purdue cut down the nets. This is only their third time going to the Final Four, and I happened to see their first Final Four. I was a young college student. I grew up in Louisville and, of course, went to school at Carolina, but got tickets for the 1969 NCAA championship at Freedom Hall in Louisville, and I was there when Purdue absolutely bashed North Carolina, and then, of course, lost to UCLA in the championship game. Everybody lost to UCLA in that area. So, great Purdue team with Rick Mount, Bill Keller, Herm Gilliam, from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So anyway, I go back a ways.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, you've had the opportunity back then to see Purdue as this is only their third time advancing to the Final Four, and so we'll see where they go from here. On the other side of it, the other number one seed that we have is UConn, and UConn coming out of the East bracket, and UConn dominating everybody, winning games by 30-plus, double-digit, wins in their matchups. They're coming from a really difficult conference, in my opinion, of the Big East. I think the two best conferences in college basketball, Division I, are the ACC and the Big East. And so seeing UConn in total domination, seeing Purdue bounce back and do what they've been doing, then we have NC State, who is the darling of this year's tournament as an 11 seed, and then Alabama, who's never made a Final Four, and in men's basketball, and them doing it as a 4 seed. Each of them have storylines to be told, but I do want to hit with this one that connects back to the ACC. Virginia lost to a 16 seed UMBC a few years back, and when that happened, they were the first number one seed to ever fall to a 16 seed in the history of the NCAA Division I men's basketball tournament. The next year, they won the national championship. Purdue became only the second number one seed to ever fall to a 16 seed in the Division I men's basketball tournament last season when they lost to Fairleigh Dickinson. And they have come in this year right after that loss to a 16 seed and are in the Final Four. There is an opportunity that in only twice in the history of Division I men's basketball have we seen a 16 beat a 1. The last time it happened, Virginia came back the next year and won a national championship. Here we are the next year, and Purdue is two steps away from winning a national championship. What are your thoughts on that, Bob, fully knowing how Virginia stormed back after everything that they heard about themselves from the outside looking in, all these people saying who they were and what they are and so on and so forth. They responded to all the scrutiny by winning a national championship, and now Purdue, in the same situation that Virginia was in a few years ago, are 2 steps away from doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think Purdue was motivated all during the first 2 weeks of the tournament by that loss to Fairleigh Dickinson. And here's what's interesting. That's Purdue's last non-conference loss. All their losses this year were to Big Ten teams. And I don't know how great the Big Ten Big Ten Conference was this year. It's certainly, you're right, Big East, ACC, top 2. But anyway, Purdue has only lost to Big Ten teams, and I think when you play in conference, I don't think we'll definitely get into the selection process here in a bit, but I don't think the selection process really evaluates adequately the difficulty of playing teams in your conference who really know you, and especially if you play at their place. That's a lot harder than meets the eye, and we saw a lot of that in the ACC where, like UNC lost to Georgia Tech, Duke lost to Georgia Tech, Mississippi State lost to Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech was not a very good team.
Yeah.
So, and I could, NC State, I think State lost twice to Syracuse, right? So, and Syracuse was, borderline. Syracuse could have been in the NCAA. They had a lot of the qualities that the tournament would look for, but it's a numbers game and didn't happen. But anyway, so that could happen with Purdue. On the other hand, Purdue hasn't seen anybody like NC State. It's going to be a fascinating matchup. I don't know if you want to get into that yet, but anyway, I can't wait until 6:09 Saturday night for the tip-off of the Wolfies and the Boilers.
Yeah, and to me, this is such an interesting matchup because you have Zach Edey on one side and Purdue, and with college basketball getting away from the big man, and now nobody knows how to defend the big man. And I find it funny how college athletics, essentially for Division I men's basketball, created this. They created the fact that teams struggle against a big man because they're not used to seeing a big man, and now here comes Zach Edey in a world where he's more by himself than he's not by himself, and people don't know how to defend against it because the league got so away from it. They wanted these 7-footers to shoot threes, not to back guys down and be a true post player. And so I think that college basketball's difficulty in guarding Zach Edey was created by college basketball's disrespect of the big man position and trying to mutate this position into a ball handler and a three-point shooter. So I think that that's on one side of it. On the other side of it, we have DJ Burns Jr., who's just a big old guy who's out there. And, I mean, you can look at it one of two ways. He gets fouled on every play or he fouls somebody on every play. I mean, with Filipowski being on him in the Elite Eight game against Duke, when you saw him go inside, there was one play in that game where DJ Burns was trying to get a shot up and he was in the paint. It was just outside the paint and he was trying to go in the paint, and he put his arm out and pushed Filipowski out of the way so that he could take the shot. No foul called. And so, DJ Burns, he's a big body guy, built differently than Zach Edey. He's kind of built like he's a lineman out here. We see him having fun. He's dancing with the band. He's bobbing his head. He's eating ice cream on the court. And he just looks like a big old teddy bear. And then he goes out there and he's got a ruthless style of play. So let's go to that world, Bob, the world of we got away from the true center in college basketball, and here's a true center in Zach Edey. And then on the other side, here's DJ Burns Jr., your local nightmare. If you're in the ACC, he's your you don't want to play a guy like him in the conference. And now we see him nationally continue to have success, continue to get inside, continue to make plays, not just in scoring inside, but overall just utilizing his body, utilizing his talent, and utilizing the fact that he seems to be loving the game out there and having so much fun playing it. Zach Edey, DJ Burns Jr., bring me into the inside of the paint for this upcoming Final Four game.
Well, it's all about the NBA, Dan. The NBA was the first to marginalize the traditional back to the basket center. Most teams, and I guess the teams that had like a 7'4" guy would continue to make use of him, but most teams want big men that can shoot the three. The offense flows better that way. They're harder to defend. You pull defenders out away from the basket. And so it's, the fact that the NBA wants big men that can shoot threes that has caused college teams to do the same thing. Zach Edey's a throwback. Jay Billis said, don't let him catch the ball 4 feet from the basket. It's over. You got to defend him 8 feet from the basket. I'm sure NC State will try to do that. I don't know what to say about DJ Burns. The guy's just amazing. There's a lot of contact in his games. A friend of mine who's a huge Carolina fan was incensed at the contact in the ACC championship when NC State upset the Tar Heels, where Burns is, he's banging Armando Bacot, who's, Armando's not exactly a skinny 190 wimp. I mean, Armando's pretty chiseled, and they're banging each other in the game, and no fouls being called. What I saw from DJ against Duke, though, was entirely, I didn't specifically see the play that you were talking about where he gave Filipowski a shove. I don't doubt it, but, to me, his performance against Duke was artistry. I've never seen a big guy like that with the positioning and the footwork and, the shot selection and the actual shooting touch. It was incredible. He's really, really gifted. It's just not that often that you see somebody that big and strong and tough who can move his feet and put the ball in the basket from either hand, put the ball in the basket from either angle. And I can't wait to see the matchup with Edey. Edey does not get called for a lot of fouls. He's averaging 2 fouls per game. Obviously, if DJ Burns can get him in foul trouble, that changes the game. On the other hand, DJ is foul prone, and he's also, because he, they list him at 275. I think he's probably carrying 300. He doesn't play. He did play 42 minutes in a 45-minute game against Oakland, but by and large, he's better when he's doing like 23, 24 minutes a game. And I think the bigger question is, can DJ Burns guard Zach Edey without getting into foul trouble? Now, he has backups. There's, Ben Middlebrooks, the Clemson transfer, has been, phenomenal in this run. He's an excellent defensive player, quick hands, quick feet, blocks shots, knocks the ball away, and he's got 5 fouls to spend. And so he's very good at giving Burns a break and coming in and defending the big guy that needs to defend. And I'm sure you know the story of Mo Diarra. He is observing Ramadan, and really long, lanky, gets terrific player, shoots probably too many threes, but anyway, this is a guy who often has to play without any nutrition. He cannot have food or beverages between sunrise and sunset. Yeah. And because they had the early game in Phoenix, it'll be, I think, a 3:00 tip-off, and so he won't get any nutrition until well after the game. So he's been truly amazing, inspirational for his team, but he also sometimes helps defend big men. He usually would defend the next biggest player, but anyway, State has some people to help DJ, and we shall see how it plays out.
Yeah, and we look at NC State, before they played in the postseason, at the end of the regular season, they had a 9-11 record in the ACC, a losing record in 20 games in the ACC, and their overall record was 17-14. They were not going to the NCAA tournament. They were the 10 seed in the ACC tournament. They had to play the 15 seed Louisville. They had to play in the first round. So if you're within the top 4 of the ACC at the end of the regular season, you're automatically advanced through the first 2 rounds. You play in the quarters. You only got to win 3 games to win a championship. You don't have to play 4. You don't have to play 5. If you are all the way to the 8-9 matchup, you don't have to play on day 1. And so when you look at that and you say to yourself, okay, let's look at the teams that automatically didn't have to play. North Carolina didn't have to play the first 2 rounds. We look at the fact that Duke didn't have to play the first 2 rounds, and Pittsburgh and Virginia. So these teams move forward, and then you see the rest of these teams. You see 4, 5, 6, 7. They're all good, and then here comes the 8-9 matchup, and which has to play more early on, and then 10 through 15 have to play in day 1. NC State's playing in day 1. They're 17-14. They're 9-11 in the conference when this happens. They play Louisville in the first game of the ACC tournament for 2024. They win that game 94-85. Then they blow out Syracuse 83-65. Then they play Duke, who Duke is now on the line here in the top 4. They've automatically advanced to the quarterfinals. They beat Duke 74-69. Then they play Virginia in overtime and beat Virginia 73-65 to go and face off against North Carolina in a battle for the state after already taking down Duke. And here's Chapel Hill versus Raleigh, and Raleigh wins this one 84-76, and that gets the NC State Wolfpack, who are not going to be in the NCAA tournament, an automatic bid in the NCAA tournament. They're the 10 seed in the ACC tournament. They're given a worse seed in the NCAA tournament. They're giving an 11 seed after all the teams they beat, and looking at Duke and North Carolina and every excuse that was made for them this year to not take care of the rest of the ACC or give respect to the rest of the ACC, but to keep Duke in the top 10, to keep North Carolina in the top 10, to make excuses for North Carolina when they lost to unranked Clemson, unranked Syracuse, unranked Georgia Tech, and then to see Duke lose to Georgia Tech and continue Duke and North Carolina to be protected by this NCAA selection committee, while the rest of the conference was left to the Wolves, and left to the Wolves, the Wolf ended up winning this one, blowing the house down, taking over the ACC, getting into the NCAA tournament, and the question that kept coming up is, you played 5 games in 5 days, you must be tired. You played 5 games in 5 days, you got to be tired. Then they play that game against Texas Tech, and they beat Texas Tech in the first round in the South Regional. They beat them 80-67, and then they asked them if they were tired. And then they beat Oakland 79-73 in overtime. And then they wanted to know, how is this team going to eventually, they got to be running out of gas, they got to be exhausted. Then they beat Marquette 67-58. Then they play Duke again, and they knocked Duke out of the postseason twice in the same campaign, knocking Duke out of the ACC tournament, knocking Duke out of the Elite Eight, don't allow them to advance to the Final Four, and they had to come back against Duke to win this game 76-64 by double digits, all to face Purdue. We have now seen them win 9 straight postseason games after losing their last 4 games of the season in the regular season at Florida State, at North Carolina, home against Duke, and at Pittsburgh, losing 4 in a row and 5 of their last 6 games. They have now won 9 straight postseason games. Mr. Holliday, who are the NC State Wolfpack?
Well, we've had a lot of flashbacks to 1983 when Jim Valvano coached a team with Thurl Bailey, Sidney Lowe, Derek Wittenberg, Terry Gannon, some others, Cozell McQueen. He coached that team to the national championship, and they came from out of nowhere. But that team was different. That team had talent and had played well during the year, but Wittenberg got hurt in January, and so they floundered. And at one point, V told the team, well, let's change our goals in. We'll go to the NIT, the little Big Apple, will be the best team in New York. And anyway, Wittenberg came back just in time for the ACC tournament, and they won the ACC tournament with a little help from Jim Larinaga, who jumped off the bench at a really key time and got a technical foul in the NC State-Virginia game, but that's another story. Anyway, the Pack won that game, and then, of course, as everybody knows, I have heard that they were going to get in because of Wittenberg's injury. The committee was going to put them in anyway, but still, they had a lot of losses, and you couldn't take anything for granted. Anyway, they got in, and, of course, went all the way. They had a lot of squeakers, and went all the way and beat Houston in the championship game very memorably. That was incredible. I was there in Albuquerque for that. It was incredible. Jay Billis was a freshman at Duke in 1983. He remembers Albuquerque very well. He says, this is much more amazing. I'll leave it at that. This year is much more amazing than the miracle of Albuquerque in 1983. And so I think that kind of puts it all into perspective. It's just, to quote Billis, you keep thinking it's going to end, but it never ends.
Yeah, we look at that run that NC State had back in the day, and by the way, Syracuse is in that 1983 tournament as well, and it's funny because we look back to Greensboro and we look back to those times, but NC State played Pepperdine. They defeated Pepperdine in their first game, and then they moved on, and so they defeated Pepperdine. It was in 2 overtimes, 69-67. Played UNLV, and as a 6 seed, UNLV defeated UNLV, who was a 3 seed, 71-70. Then they played Utah and beat Utah in that game 75-56. Then they beat Virginia, who they also beat this year, mind you, folks, in not the NCAA, but in the postseason in the ACC. North Carolina State.
Huge frustration for Big Ralph Sampson. I mean, one of the greatest players in college basketball history, and NC State twice denied him in his senior year.
Yeah, and Virginia loses to NC State 63-62. Then they go off and play Georgia and beat Georgia 67-60 to go into that game in Albuquerque. And, of course, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that fateful day when Houston faced off against North Carolina State, and North Carolina State became a national champion, winning 54-52 in that matchup against a number 1 seeded Houston, with NC State being a 6 seed at the time. So, just really a beautiful run that they had back then. But we're looking at now, and we're looking at the field is bigger now. The field is bigger now. There's more teams in the ACC now. There's more days in the ACC tournament. There's more things for NC State to have to go through. And now, NC State, if they make this run, obviously they have an incredible run in 1983, but I think 2024 is pretty amazing itself. What is it about this team? Because, I've heard people say, we're trying to figure out who they are. We still don't know who they are. You and I cover the ACC, and I tell people this all the time. When DJ Burns Jr. is on your team, you love him. When he's not on your team, you want a foul called on every play. And when your team is knocked out of the tournament, you look at DJ Burns, if you're a Syracuse fan or a Duke fan or a North Carolina fan or Georgia Tech or whoever, you look at DJ Burns Jr. and say to yourself, you know what? He's not playing against my team today. I'm going to go for DJ Burns. This man, and of course DJ Horn and Casey Morsell, there's so many guys on this team that have done, and Michael O'Donnell, what they've done on this team and what they put forward here, and of course Kevin Keats and all the work that he's done, and Michael O'Connell, I want to make sure I said it right the first time, and then I second-guessed myself, Michael O'Connell and the work that he's done. This team has a bunch of talented guys. It's not just DJ Horn or DJ Burns or one or the other of whoever. This is a team that has really banded together. Kevin Keats has done a tremendous job. And Bob, you and I know this. Kevin Keats in recent history was depleted. his team, between injury and different things going on, he didn't have a big roster, and he's fighting through all this stuff. People said, at the end of this season, maybe he's going to lose his job. And I'm sitting here looking at Keats saying, I don't think he's had enough time. I don't think he's had enough things that were in his control to turn around and throw this guy out of Raleigh. But now we're looking at the future of Kevin Keats and the world that he can live in, and how he's representing the ACC as the only ACC team left that's advanced to the Final Four this year. What are your thoughts on NC State as people try to describe them? You cover them. You're in that area. You obviously are with those teams within the Carolinas. You know all about the Wolfpack from the history to the right now. So who is NC State, in your opinion, this season to educate some people that may have no idea where this team came from? And what are your thoughts on Kevin Keats and what he's navigated through, not just this year, but to bring this team to where they are?
Much to cover here, Dan, but
I know.
Quick flashback.
Yeah.
In the Pepperdine game in 1983, Dane Settle, who was like an, 85, 90% free throw shooter, had free throws for the win. Jim Valvano's incredible strategist, had Cozell McQueen, who we felt was on the wrong side, great defensive rebounder, kind of like Mo Diarra. He had Cozell McQueen switch sides. Settle missed. The ball bounced to Cozell McQueen. State goes on to win in double overtime. If he doesn't make that change, 83 never happens.
Yeah.
I just find that amazing.
Yeah.
One other story to share. My partner Jay Jennings and I were staying at the same hotel with some referees, and in that era, the referees, there were 2 teams of 3 referees, and they competed for the chance to move on to the championship game. I don't remember who called the NC State-Georgia game, but the guys that called the Louisville-Houston game, which was one of the most exciting, beautiful, free-flowing games in history, Dunk Fest, the 3 guys that called that game were Dr. Hank Nichols, Joe Forte, and Paul Houseman. They were all ACC refs. We were staying at the same hotel as they were, and we found, we just assumed because of their ACC affiliation that they would not move on, and we saw them like 10 minutes before my live shot.
Yeah.
And they said, that doesn't matter. We got the assignment. We're calling this game. And so it was like 70 in Albuquerque when we arrived, and it was like 28 the day of the championship game. I was freezing. But between clenched teeth, I told the world that an ACC crew was going to be calling that championship game. And I don't think that Guy Lewis was too pleased with that. But what a game that was. Anyway, Kevin Keats, he was on the hot seat. I don't think there's any doubt about that. NC State's fan base has, they've been frustrated. They've had some pretty good success in football, but they haven't won a championship in a very long time. Their last football championship was 1979, and they hadn't won a basketball championship since 1987. Yeah. They wanted more. And, finishing with 4 straight losses, and let's face it, Louisville, they were sleepwalking through the first half against Louisville. I said, this is going to end quickly. Yeah. Remember, DJ Horn was out with a hip flexor problem then, as well as, some other injuries. And so I thought, this is going to end quickly. But, they found something in that second half against Louisville. They didn't defend well, giving up 85 points. But they really had started the locker room chant, why not us? Why not us? And I think that when they won that game against some kind of tall odds, that started it. And you described the Syracuse game pretty accurately, I think. And, they were better than Duke and better than Carolina. And each game they seemed to get a little bit better. The Oakland game was really impressive, I thought, because, Oakland, the Golden Grizzlies had this guy from Pewaukee, Wisconsin, drawing a blank, was Greslick. I've never seen it. He killed Kentucky, 10 of 20 from 3. Penn State really defended him well. Here's the thing about Kevin Keats' philosophy. He has a really different philosophy than most coaches.
Yeah.
He believes that if we shoot more threes and we defend the three-point line and we win the turnover battle, we're going to win the game. That is Kevin Keats basketball. He may get out-rebounded. Other things happen. But anyway, against Oakland, they defended the three-point line incredibly. Casey Morcell was critical. Defended the three-point line really well late in the game. They made more threes, and I don't think there were a lot of turnovers in that battle. But anyway, that's Kevin Keats basketball. And I guarantee you going into the Purdue game, they're going to be all over the Boilers on the three-point line, and they will try to force turnovers. They pressure. They have the depth, I think, to go. They don't have as much depth as they had sometimes. They still have enough to put pressure on most of the court, most of the game, and that can add up. So, Purdue is really, really impressive, but I wouldn't count out the pack just yet. I mean, I think it's going to be a whale of a game.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, you brought up Oakland, Jack Golke, and what he did. I mean, first and foremost, when I saw Jack on the court, when I saw his face, I thought he was the coach. I was like, this guy's like 25 years old. I mean, I know Armando Bacot is, going on 40 years old at this point. But, when you look at Golke, it was like, wow. I mean, this looks like a grown man. And you're just kind of thinking to yourself, like, how's this guy still playing? And then you find out Armando and these other guys, they're in like their mid-20s because of the COVID year, and they could keep rocking and rolling here. But the run that NC State has made, you mentioned Oakland. In order for Oakland to get to that game, Oakland had to do what some considered the unthinkable. Let's break down, because Bob and I have been talking about this beyond the world of broadcasting. Him and I have been spending a lot of time speaking with each other off camera about things that have gone on with the ACC. We both fully understand the ACC has been disrespected for the last 3 seasons, including with this season being one of those included seasons. And in having that be the case, when we look at these last 3 seasons, they've backed it up. They've definitely backed it up. And to me, it's been a very interesting world with the ACC. I don't know what happened. I don't know why it happened. It's been a head scratcher. The ACC, in a lot of cases, I could have argued, had too many teams in back in the day, and now the ACC is, in my opinion, not getting enough. In the last 3 years, they have not been given national respect. They've responded by getting very far in the tournament. They've responded by getting to the Final Four. They've responded by continuing to be represented in the Final Four. We look at the SEC. The SEC had 8 teams in this year out of 14. 8 out of 14. I want you to take that in to real just consideration, folks. More than half of the conference of the SEC got in. This is what happened. They bring in 8 teams. Number 3 seeded Kentucky loses in the first round to Oakland. Number 4 seeded Auburn loses in the first round to Yale. I picked that game. Number 6 seeded South Carolina loses to Oregon. I picked that game. Number 7 seeded Florida loses to Colorado. Number 8 seeded Mississippi State loses to Michigan State. I picked that game. So you look at the SEC. In just the first round, they lost 5 of their 8 teams. In the round of 64, they lost more than half of the teams that went in. Now, Texas A&M gave Houston all they could in a game that had to go to extra time, and Houston ended up getting through that. Alabama's in their first Final Four ever, and Tennessee got bounced out, eventually here. So seeing Tennessee fall to Purdue in that Elite Eight. So there are teams that made it farther. Texas A&M had a reputable time here, and obviously Tennessee did as well, and Alabama is still going. But seeing 5 of the 8 of the SEC gone in the first round, and to see where they were seated as well. They were all the higher seeded team, and they all lost in the first round, speaking of those 5 that I mentioned. Then we look at the Pac-12 in their last season of existence here as we know them. They had 4 teams that had made it. And when we look at the Pac-12, we look at Arizona. Arizona lost to Clemson. We look at Washington State, who had an early exit here. Colorado, after beating Florida, had an early exit. And Oregon found themselves getting bounced out after winning that first game against the SEC. There is no representation of the Pac-12 of those 4 teams in the Final Four. The Mountain West, which I'm still trying to figure this one out. Nevada won, so Nevada had to get into the NCAA tournament because they won the conference tournament. But when we look at San Diego State was coming off of not only their first Elite Eight and their first Final Four and their first championship game, but it was also the first for the Mountain West as a conference. San Diego State getting to the Elite Eight, Final Four, and championship game were all first for the Mountain West as a conference, not just San Diego State as a single institution. Maybe that's why they felt like they got to put these teams on the coattails. But we saw San Diego State fall in this rematch in the national championship game. There was no rematch to it. This was a round 1 knockout by UConn. San Diego State, the focus of the Mountain West, gone. Utah State, gone. And then their coach gone shortly after that, decided to go elsewhere. We also saw the Colorado State loss as they went on here. We saw Nevada lose. We saw New Mexico lose. And then Boise State also finding their way out of this one. I scratch my head as to how the Mountain West got more teams than the ACC. I continue to scratch my head as none of those 6 teams really had a good performance except for San Diego State for a little bit of time before getting blown out. They looked the same as Stetson going up against UConn as far as that end line score. The Big Ten had 6 teams that made it. Of the 6 teams in the Big Ten, 1 is still here, and that is Purdue. I don't think a ton of people are surprised. Some people might be. I'm a little surprised in Purdue because I didn't buy into it's just hard to see them on that number 1 line. I haven't trusted, not just last year, but in general, I don't trust to pick Purdue all the way through, and they've proven me wrong up to this point. Credit to them for that. Illinois, they got to that Elite Eight matchup again, going up against UConn and having their barn doors blown off. Then we look at Northwestern, Michigan State. Yes, Tom Izzo is good to win a game, but besides that, what else are we looking at? Wisconsin did absolutely nothing in this. So when we go back and we reflect on these teams, we say to ourselves, Illinois had a pretty nice run. Michigan State, should they have even been in the tournament? We look at Northwestern, we look at Wisconsin, and to me, there wasn't a lot to be had in this conference. Again, a conference that's been getting in 6, 7, 9 teams into the tournament of these last few years that they've disrespected the ACC, speaking on the NCAA selection committee. In their disrespect of the ACC, they've been flooding the tournament with Big Ten teams, and more often than not, they have nothing to show for it. They have Purdue, though. Of the 6 bids, 1 remains. In the Big East, they only got 3 bids. And Creighton made a run, and Marquette got beat by NC State, who's been on fire, and UConn has been head and shoulders above everyone they've played up to this point. The Big 12 received 8 bids like the SEC, and this is how it went down. Of the 8 bids that the Big 12 had in here, we saw number 2 Iowa State go up against Illinois and eventually lose. We saw the 7-seeded Texas team lose to Tennessee. We saw Houston lose to Duke in a game where they lost Jamal Shedd, their starting point guard, in the first half. We saw Baylor lose to Clemson, and I had picked Clemson. I don't know what other people were thinking, but we saw that happen with that. Then we look at the fact as BYU lost to Duquesne, and I picked Duquesne in that game, and Texas Tech lost to NC State. TCU lost to Utah State, and that was another game where you look here and say to yourself, what's going on with all of these teams in the Big 12 to give them all these spots? 8 spots to the Big 12. By the way, Kansas got a 4 seed after losing to unranked foes. They got a 4 seed. They lost to UCF and they never fell out of the top 4. Look at Kansas. They say the NET cares about losing to unranked or people that aren't a quad 1, teams that aren't quad 1 or this, that, whatever. So when they lost to UCF, what happened? Nothing. When they got blown out by 30, they said the NET takes into account when you blow a team out or you get blown out. That didn't matter either. Kansas lost the last game of the regular season that they had in the Big 12 to Houston, a newcomer in the Big 12, by 30 points. Kansas did not do anything special. Kansas did not look great in the Big 12 tournament. Yet they get a 4 seed. Not just get in. They get a 4 seed. And Kansas got absolutely manhandled by Gonzaga. And look at Kansas and look at Gonzaga's first matchup. They beat McNeese State by 21. Then they went and beat Kansas by the exact same amount, 21. McNeese and Kansas both had the same point differential when playing up against Gonzaga. So you take all of that into account and you say, okay, of the 8 schools that the Big 12 has, who is still in the tournament from the Big 12? Well, folks, that's a great question. The answer is nobody. So when you look at the SEC and the Big 12 accounting for 16 spots in a tournament that has 68, and you look at 14 of those spots being at-large. At-large bids, there are 36 of them. So when 14 are going to 2 conferences, that leaves not many for the rest of the country, the rest of the other 30 conferences to have to fight for. 16 bids, 14 at-large, 1 in the Final Four. The ACC, 5 bids. 4 of them had found themselves advancing. 4 of them looking better than how the SEC performed in the first round. And when you look at those teams, North Carolina, Duke, Clemson, NC State, the only team to lose was Virginia in the first 4. NC State's in the Final Four. Clemson was almost in the Final Four. Duke was almost in the Final Four. And North Carolina, of these 4, had the worst showing as far as looking at the rest of these teams. Duke and NC State, one of them had to kick the other one out. So what would it have looked like if they didn't set them up to play each other potentially? We don't know. Could Duke be in it right now? Would Alabama be in? Would other teams be in? Well, that's left to be seen, and we're never going to know that. But Duke and NC State provided the fact that somebody was going to get in from the ACC. So that's a tough one to look at because they both got into the Elite 8. So they both had pushed very far for the ACC. Clemson was in the Elite 8. They accounted for 3 out of 8 Elite 8 schools, almost 50% of the entire nation. And between the Big East and the ACC, 7 of 16 Sweet 16, almost 50% of the country coming from 2 conferences. So my question to you, Bob, is if 16 schools from the SEC and the Big 12 combined, if 16 come from there and only one of them is in the Final Four, then how do we explain the fact that the ACC and the Big East had 8, and of the 8 that they had, 7 went to the Sweet 16, and almost half of them went to the, and then looking at the ACC, 3 of them go to the Elite 8, and then we see UConn in the run that they made. So we're talking about either 50% or almost 50% of the country coming from 2 conferences that are not named the SEC and Big 12, who accounted for 16 spots.
Well, Dan, you're preaching to the choir, and I tweeted about a lot of these things, but I wanted to give your listeners some perspective as to my background. Lived in Louisville until I was 11. I was a Kentucky fan, saw 4 Final Fours by the time I was a teenager. Moved to Milwaukee in the heyday of Al McGuire and Marquette. Went to Coach Al's camp. Used to hang out with his son, Al Jr. I learned a lot of basketball there. I was a Big Ten fan. When I went to school at Carolina, I was a Big Ten fan as a freshman. And, my roommates and people in the hall weren't hearing it. Oh, no, the ACC's tougher. So it was only over time that I learned really how good the ACC is. I want to make that clear. I have a background following other conferences, and I've lived the ACC for a lot of years, and it's the best. No, I mean, the Big East, I think, had a bit better year this year, but they're both close. There was, I saw a video of Tim Brando, a friend of mine, and some talk show guy in the Midwest. And so Tim, even though it hasn't been a great NCAA tournament, the Big 12 is still the best conference, right? And, Tim was diplomatic, but I'm thinking, no, it's not even close. Yeah. It's not even close. The SEC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the Mountain West, I mean, all those conferences got lots of bids and underperformed. The system is badly in need of reform. Yeah. UNC Athletic Director Bob Cunningham is going to be the chairman next year, and I hope that the basketball selection committee will make some changes. Luke DeCock, who you may know, an outstanding writer and columnist for the Raleigh News and Observer, says that actually, based on this year's metrics, the ACC did not really get a raw deal, but, the metrics are the problem. I mean, let's face it, the Big 12 jumped to the top because they played cupcakes and beat the snot out of them.
Yeah.
You should not, rise to the top just because you play easy to beat teams and win by 50 or 40. No, that's wrong. And so we got to get rid of that. Especially if, as you pointed out, Kansas, lost by a lot and it didn't count against them. If you're going to have if margin of victory is going to be a factor, then it's at least got to go both ways. But I think margin of victory is overrated. I mean, play tough teams. I think Pitt was a good team. I think Pitt could easily have been an NCAA tournament team. Last year they got in. They were had a play-in game, but they won that play-in game and then won a first-round game as well. Jeff Capel has a good program, but they didn't have great non-conference competition. And that's a tough call because Jeff Capel says that the teams they scheduled, they thought were going to be good, but they didn't turn out to be. What do you do about that? I don't know. It's just, I guess, if you play enough teams that you think you're going to be good instead of just 2 or 3, maybe that'll make a difference. But that needs to change. Luke wants to get rid of the quads. I don't mind the quads, but I just think the one thing that's not happening is the committee never looks at history. To me, the ACC should get extra consideration, the eye test, the difficulty of the rivalries, and then look at the track record. I mean, like the Big Ten's last national championship, I think, was 2000. I believe I'm right on that. The ACC, as I've said many times, this is my favorite stat of all time. The ACC has sent at least one team to the Sweet 16 every year since Black Sunday, which is what we call when Duke and Carolina both lost in the same day in Reynolds Coliseum and did not reach the Sweet 16. The ACC has advanced every year, at least one team, usually more. This year, 4? Every year to the Sweet 16. That's 45 years. You got more national championships, more Final Four appearances, more trips to the championship game, and that's never counted. To me, that's just stupid. Why do you not look at track record? Why do you focus on? And with all due respect to Iowa State, my family's from Iowa, and my parents are Iowa State natives, or Iowa State graduates. But with all due respect to Iowa State and Kansas and the people of the Big 12, why do you place more emphasis on the 40-point blowout they got over, Quincy than you do on the ACC's track record in the NCAA tournament? I just don't get it.
Yeah, and the quads are confusing. I mean, Syracuse beat NC State on the road, and the night that they beat them, it was a quad 1. When we woke up the next morning, NC State had fallen down the rankings, and it was a quad 2. And I'm sitting here saying to myself, how does this happen? How I mean, it's and I looked at certain right and certain conferences, Bob. Certain conferences went undefeated against quad 4, 13-0 against quad 4, adding quad 3, and they're 17-0, but they didn't play a quad 1 game. Or they went 0-1 against quad 1, 6-3 against quad 2, or 5-3 against quad 2, and then they went undefeated against quad 4 and maybe undefeated against quad 3. Certain conferences had to beat quad 3 and 4. Other conferences had to beat quad 1 and 2. You can't have a system where a conference is held accountable for losing a quad 1 game when other conferences are given the credit for beating a bunch of quad 4 teams, because the whole thing about why we're supposed to have a system put in place is so that you don't schedule cupcakes for the first 10 or 11 games of the season to blow them out before you get into conference play. That was the whole point. People would say all the time, well, Syracuse doesn't leave home the whole state of November. Syracuse doesn't leave for the first 2 months. They're playing 10 out of 11 games at home. They're playing Canisius and St. Bonaventure and Buffalo and Siena and so on and so forth. And then they're going into the Big East back then when people are having these discussions. And now I look at it and I say to myself, if based on the metrics that we have now, Syracuse should play only 11 cupcakes before playing 20 ACC games, because if that's the metrics, then that's what we're looking at. The problem that I have is, why do you get promoted if you're North Carolina for beating a team by 30, but then when Kansas loses by 30 to Houston, nothing happens to them? By the way, by the numbers, basically what I'm saying here, it's the same thing with strength of schedule. It's the same thing with RPI. It's the same thing with the NET. You can call a ranking whatever you want to call a ranking. You can throw any acronym you want at me. The reality of it all is some conferences are protected, some teams are protected, some coaches are protected, and there's been excuses made for the Big Ten, for the SEC, and the Big 12, and there's been lack of respect for the ACC. And in the last 3 years that the ACC has been treated as a down conference, they have proven that they are the opposite. The reason why the bottom of the ACC beats the top of the ACC, the reason why the middle beats the bottom beats the middle beats the top beats the middle. The reason why on any given night anybody can beat anybody is because the ACC top to bottom is a good conference. The reason why Georgia Tech wins games is not because North Carolina or Duke or NC State or any of these teams stink, or that Pittsburgh stinks or Virginia stinks. The reason why Georgia Tech is winning these games is because every part of the conference is competitive. People look at Louisville's schedule and they look at their record, but they forget about the fact of how they pushed teams to the brink. They forget about the fact that they came to Syracuse in the Dome and forced Syracuse to score almost 100 points to beat them by 2. So when you look at and how NC State had that, like you said, they were going through that first round of the ACC tournament this year, and they barely got out of there alive against 15 seeded out of 15, Louisville. So the ACC is not a down conference. They weren't a down conference last year or the year before. The ACC top to bottom is competitive, and they're getting punished for it. The same way that the Big East used to get punished for being good top to bottom. And I ran the numbers, Bob, while we were sitting here having this discussion. If you add up the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the Mountain West, just at large, there are 32 automatic bids for 32 conference champions in Division I men's basketball. That means that of the 68, there's 36 at large. If you add up the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the Mountain West for this year, 2024, they accounted for 24 of 36 at-large bids, leaving 28 conferences trying to get 12 spots this year. That, to me, is insane.
No question. I think there is bias. I kind of trace the decline of ACC bids in 2016, 2017, 2018. The ACC got more bids. There were 5, 6, 7 bids. And the ACC was considered strong then. They started the NET in 2018, but they revised the NET in 2021. And I forget exactly what it was that they did that made the NET different. But since the revision in 2021, the ACC has gotten screwed, has gotten fewer bids, in spite of good performance. And I think I don't know how you can dispute the fact that there is conference bias in there for the ones that you cited. Like I say, I hope that when Bubba Cunningham takes over next year, that things will be different. They'll make some changes in the evaluation system, but it's. I think there's jealousy at the ACC. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and maybe there's more. It's maybe like they're the conferences that are trying to feed what some see as the inevitable demise of the ACC, and I don't necessarily see the demise as inevitable, but it's out there.
Yeah, speaking of the demise of the ACC, our final topic to speak on here with Bob Holliday of WRALSportsFan.com and his many years of coverage as in the broadcasting and journalism world in general and the writing world. Bob has given so much to coverage of the ACC as well as coverage of athletics in general in this country, and I always appreciate having him here on Wake Up Call. The demise of the ACC, as you mentioned, you don't believe it's happening, but it could happen if Clemson and Florida State were to leave. In football, it would be devastating. Now, there's an interesting approach to this argument. Clemson has been the national representative for the ACC in the college football playoff. Florida State, a few seasons ago, now keep in mind, folks, they've had Mike Norvell for the last few years. Before that, they went from Jimbo to Willie for a year and a half. And so they've had these coaching moves and trying to find the right fit and trying to find the right guy. Just a few years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, Florida State might be quiet right now. Might not say anything to the ACC because they weren't that good in football at the time. Now they're striking while the iron's hot. Clemson is saying, hey, we've been a national champion multiple times. Look at what we've done for this conference. It's us versus Alabama. Typically, when people think about college football playoff history, they think of us and Alabama more than anybody else. Overall, maybe they think of Georgia now too, but we're in that three that are going to be spoken about when it comes to schools in the college football playoff since its institution. I prognosticated over 2 years ago that Clemson and Florida State and potentially Miami would be going to the SEC. My prognostication was based on what I had been seeing in realignment, what I thought the SEC would want, the rivalries that they'd want to retain, like Clemson, South Carolina, and Florida State. The fact that Miami I've never viewed as a loyal school to a conference after growing up with what they did in the Big East. So looking at this, I thought, okay, the SEC is going to be at 16. I think they could get to 18 or 20. I think if they get to 18, they're going to go off on their own. And I've said for over 2 years that the SEC would form their own league. My change to that, or adjustment to it, not a change, an addition to it, an addendum, is the fact that the Big Ten decided to go and get 4 West Coast schools in USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. Over a year ago, when the move was made to get USC and UCLA, I had made the comment that it made sense to me that the Big Ten having the Midwest and the Northeast and the SEC having the Southern Middle and the Southeast, that the Big Ten going and getting the West Coast is so the Big Ten could go with the SEC to form their own conference, their own league, whatever they want it to be called. 2 conferences, but to form a league outside of the NCAA, where the SEC would have their own playoff, the Big Ten would have their playoff, and the champion of both would play for the national championship. Now, Clemson and Florida State, that have both gone in a lawsuit against the ACC that has been discussed here on the show, and with my father, a lawyer of 44 years and dealing with contracts for at least 25 of those 44 years, we had the conversation of the fact that there could be a loophole in here for the for Clemson and for FSU to get out, because has the conference done everything in their power in order to get the best TV deal with ESPN? Have they exhausted everything? A judge could rule based on his opinion or her opinion that maybe they have or maybe they haven't. Now, in setting up this question to you, Bob, as we look at my prognostication of the SEC going on its own, then the Big Ten getting the West schools to go with the SEC. We now look at the fact that the college football playoff has been expanded to 12. We'll see it for the first time this coming season for 24-25. Right after they decide to go to 12, there's this release that comes out that they thought about going to 14 and giving only 2 byes every year to the same 2 conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten. Well, why are they doing that? Then you look at the SEC and the Big Ten in college basketball and say, okay, why are they getting all these at-large spots? They are playing into the hand of what I predicted over 2 years ago. The NCAA, the college football playoff, everybody's trying to make the SEC and the Big Ten happy nationally because they are autonomous conferences, which means they're self-governing. And when I spoke with John Swofford, the former ACC commissioner, I spoke to him about, you don't choose names lightly. You don't choose autonomy, which means self-governing, to not think at some point you can break away. He told me years ago that it was a topic of conversation. It was a potential. It was not something they were looking to do in that moment, but it wasn't out of the realm of possibility or not something that hasn't been discussed. Fast forward now and come to right here. Clemson and Florida State have gone lawsuits against the ACC. The ACC's grant of rights is brought into question. I've read the grant of rights. We looked at it on the show. We talked about it here on the show. Bob, it seems like everything I said is coming to fruition, and I really do believe that if the SEC, not the Big Ten, because it makes no sense for them to do this, and the rivals are in the SEC, and I think the SEC might do away with non-conference games, so they're going to want to bring in Clemson, South Carolina, Florida, Florida State. If and when Clemson and Florida State leave the ACC, I believe there's only one more chip to fall. If Notre Dame goes to the Big Ten, then I believe that every major commodity in college football will be in 2 conferences, which will allow them to break away and truly call whoever their champion is the true national champion. I want your thoughts on my prediction, which we've spoken about before to an extent, and what you think about Clemson and Florida State, and if we are seeing the potential demise of ACC football.
First, some background. In the 20s, the Southern Conference had more than 30 schools.
Yeah. So
and I think it was like 1929, 1930, Kentucky and Tennessee and the schools from the Southeastern Conference broke away from the Southern Conference. Later, the ACC schools will break away. But why did they break away? Because the conference was too big. Schools had too many different goals and agendas, and these are academic institutions, and so they had different philosophies, and it was unwieldy. So we decided to go back to the future and have unwieldy conferences. But the difference now is that there's this incredible revenue stream, and that. But remember that we had big conferences a century ago, and didn't work out very well. So, I was kind of flabbergasted at first when Florida State sued the ACC. I'm thinking, how audacious! These guys haven't had a great program since Jimbo left. Then they did have a really good year this year, and it did not help. The optics were not good. That they were bounced from the playoffs because of injuries, and that NC State's Boo Corrigan was the chairman of the committee, the one who made the announcement. That was not that. Just the optics on that were not good.
Yeah.
And obviously, I've heard the rumors about Clemson for years and years, decades. I mean, they always. 70s and 80s kind of, they played a lot of SEC schools and, always kind of related to the SEC, but at the same time, the timing when they announced that they're suing the league, that was a bit of a shock. You've discussed things with your father, the lawyer, and I've read analysis that the ACC did not write a very secure contract here. That first of all, there's nothing to prevent the suits from being heard in North Carolina, outside of North Carolina, which obviously a suit that's heard in district court in Florida is going to be very different than one that's heard in North Carolina. So that's a weakness. And then the other thing is that, and I didn't know this until recently, that the ESPN has an option year in 2025, and so if ESPN chooses not to pick up the option, the grant of rights is dead. And that's where we are.
Yeah. And it seems like, and I feel like back in the day, people frowned upon this, and now it feels different. But this whole world of what was once crazy is now okay. And in the world of collegiate athletics, the thought that a TV station, that a network could run college athletics, could say what's going to happen, could have any hand in the pot, was considered something illegal, wrong, egregious, just bad for everybody, bad for schools, bad for sports, bad for control, bad for monopolizing things. And yet we're here today with the reality that some people believe the Pac-12 was killed by television. And what did they have up at the time, Bob? Their TV contract. And here we are in an option year next year with ESPN. If they decide to not take up the option for the ACC, now ESPN is in control of the future of the ACC in 2025. And could we see another conference killed or mutilated by television? A few years ago, Bob, we would have said this was wrong.
The Pac-12 presidents and commissioners were blindsided. They didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
It's different in the ACC. The ACC administrators are all aware. And here's another interesting thing. In North Carolina, our state legislature and board of governors, I don't agree with them on a lot of things, but I think they made a wise move when they decided to require that any state school, i.e. state or Carolina, that wants to change conferences has to come to them and present a plan of profitability. And so, a lot of people say, Carolina's future is secure. Everybody wants Carolina. Carolina can't leave on its own. Carolina will have to present a plan to the Board of Governors showing why this move is profitable. I think the idea is that they want to try to have, be able to kind of keep state Carolina together. That's not stated, but I think that's the unwitting goal here, is that we can say we don't like your plan, and you may have to then come back with another one. And meanwhile, if NC State wants to go with you and comes back with a plan we like, we may approve that. But you're not leaving just because you want to, and that's unique. I don't know that that's happening anywhere else. So that's also something at play. We also need to remember that ESPN's not the only network.
Yeah.
CBS obviously has helped bankroll the SEC for years and still does. NBC, it's the Notre Dame Broadcast Network, right?
Yeah.
What are they going to do? And I do think Notre Dame is a key player here. I mean, when you go to the expanded playoff, do they get an automatic berth if they're qualified, or
no?
Are they going to get passed over for a conference? That kind of brings that to a head.
Yeah.
But I could see, to me, worst case scenario, when the Big East no longer was a football conference, and the ACC had a lot to do with that, poaching some Big East schools. It continued. It kind of rebranded itself as a great basketball conference. which still happens. And, if the ACC drops back a step in football, I can still see this being a vital conference. Fox Sports I think would probably love to show ACC basketball. You have an over-the-air network history through Raycom that it continues today. That's a possibility. I think there are TV packages that could keep the conference afloat.
Yeah.
So I'm not thinking it's doomsday yet, but these are going to be really, really interesting times.
Yeah, and I think Fox has already proven. I mean, they picked up the Big East, and that's been huge for them to pick up the Big East and have that. So we shall see where we go from here. But, Bob, as always, as we look at this and the Carolinas, where things stand, how everything is relative to the time, because North Carolina football was going nowhere a few years ago with 2 to 3 wins in a season. So here, and Duke was obscure. They were at the bottom of the conference. So, we look at these conversations and we say, some people might be striking while the iron's hot. And again, if we go back to mega conferences, they will only break another time. And that's just a reality, even if this happens. So for Bob Holliday of WRALSportsFan.com, and all the work that he's done. Speaking here on the tournament, the ACC, Clemson, and Florida State. Bob, any final word that you have here, as I always appreciate it. And now that we've talked about this stuff, I have more thoughts where I didn't know about that with North Carolinian teams, that they have to come and present their plan, and that, as a government, they could turn around and go, no, we're not going to do that. So any final word that you want to make?
Going back to the tournament, luck always plays a factor. Interviewed Frank McGuire after North Carolina won the 57 championship. There was a play where they were about to lose to Wake Forest in the semifinals of the ACC tournament, and that was a time where only one team advanced. Lenny Rosenbluth hits a hook shot from the top of the key, has huge contact with Wendell Carr, and they called the foul on Wendell. Wendell always maintained to his dying day, he charged me, and you can look at the video and see his argument. Anyway, Carolina, thanks to Lenny's miracle hook shot, won. And Frank McGuire told me, in a coach's life, remember this, you got to be good, but you got to be lucky. And look at NC State. They're losing to Virginia. They're done. But one of Virginia's best free throw shooters misses a 1-and-1. The pack goes flying down the floor, and Michael O'Connell puts up a 35-footer that hits the backboard, takes 2 trips around the rim, and drops in. Overtime, and they win. And I truly believe that the devastation of that loss had a lot to do with why Virginia played so poorly in the NCAAs against Colorado State. And in 1983, NC State against Houston, they're passing the ball around, playing for the final shot. They almost had a pass intercepted that would have been a Houston dunk in the end of the game. But anyway, the ball goes back to Wittenberg. He always maintains it's a pass, but Derek, we know you were trying to make the winning shot. Anyway, it comes up a foot short, and Lorenzo Charles grabs it and dunks it, and the rest is history. So we're going to see some great players, some great action this weekend, but luck is part of the equation, Dan.
That coming from Bob Holliday. And I will say I am lucky to have met you all those years ago. That's been part of the equation as to how we even end up here on Wake Up Call together today. Bob Holliday, WRALSportsFan.com. Look him up. Check out his work. 2 L's in Holliday, and a ton of amazing things to catch from his incredible work over the years. Bob, as always, I respect you, I appreciate you, and I value your time.
Ditto, Dan. Always a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed visiting with you.
And sounds good. You too. Take care and be safe. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye now.
See you. That coming from Bob Holliday here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. And we're getting you ready here for this weekend. It's going to be awesome. Awesome, folks. Cannot wait, and very excited to bring you in to this beautiful, wonderful weekend that is going to be featuring the Final Four. Are you ready for the Final Four? And, of course, as we discussed, we're going to see Purdue take on NC State, a 1 versus an 11, respectively, and then we will see Alabama in their first ever Final Four, a 4 seed, take on the overall number 1 seed, UConn. And those games will decide who's going to play in the national championship, and then we will crown a national champion, as we do in April on a Monday when it comes to men's basketball. On the women's side of things, a lot of excitement here as well. Their games are going to be played on Friday and Sunday, as the men are played on Saturday and Monday. And on today, here on Friday, April 5th, we will see NC State's Wolfpack. On the women's side of things, they're going to keep it going. Very excited about this and about what this is going to look like here. The women's side of things, UConn, men's and women's, NC State, men's and women's make history. There's never been 2 schools in Division I in the NCAA that have each sent their men's and women's basketball team to the same tournament in the same year. So congratulations to NC State and UConn for making history. NC State women's team, with the number 3 seed, will take on number 1 seeded South Carolina. That game will be today at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN and ESPN+. And that's at 7 o'clock. Following at approximately 9 o'clock, we will see the 3-seeded UConn take on the 1-seeded Iowa. 2 3 seeds, 2 1 seeds. Who's going to make it to the national championship game? And that game is also going to be on ESPN and ESPN+, to figure out our national championship game, which will be played on Sunday, April 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC and ESPN in Cleveland, Ohio, where the Final Four is going to be as well. On the men's side of things, to let you know what's coming up for them, their games on Saturday, April 6th, tomorrow, for those of you that are here with us, NC State, the 11 seed, will take on 1-seeded Purdue on TBS Saturday, April 6th at 6:09 p.m. Eastern Time. That game will be followed at approximately 8:49 p.m. Eastern Time, also on TBS, with 4-seeded Alabama up against 1-seeded UConn. The national championship game for men's basketball will happen on Monday night, April 8th, at the State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. That game will tip off at 9:20 p.m. Eastern Time for the sole purpose of keeping you up until 1 o'clock in the morning. With that being said, I want to thank you all for tuning in to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Of course, on YouTube.com and Facebook.com, both /WakeUpCallDT, on WakeUpCallDT.podbean.com. Worldwide, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Stay tuned to our specials coming up this Monday and Tuesday in a unique way with awesome Bobcat Buzz doubleheader with Mary Hawkins, who is the director of the Syracuse campuses in Syracuse and in Liverpool, and her leadership segment, as well as my Brian and Stratton Bobcats of Syracuse segment with the baseball team in year number 2. And I'm very happy to have DJ Hill as well as Dylan Hodgman and, of course, head coach Mr. Sean Peak. Very excited to have them all on the broadcast. So those 2 specials coming up to you this Monday and a Bobcat takeover on Wake Up Call. And on Tuesday, we will have some awesome stuff for you as well, including Matthew Hahn, who will be joining me, who is committed to Syracuse from Christian Brothers Academy, joining his teammate Darian Williams, as they both will go from CBA to Syracuse University right down the road, not even 5 minutes away. And they will be both going there in 2025 after working to try and win another sectional and state title in 2024. Thank you for watching and listening Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Of course, you could find Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts, Player FM, Podbean, Podvine, Podchaser.com, Spotify, TuneIn, and YouTube, amongst others. All you have to do is search Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, or one word, Wake Up Call DT. And a big time thanks to our incredible partners once again, Carvel DeWitt, the Wildcat Sports Pub, as well as Mon Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory, GG Cards and Breaks, Avicoli's, Canine Camp Dog Daycare, Chick-fil-A Cicerone, Chick-fil-A Clay, Canine Campground Dog Boarding, Pizza Man, Great Lakes Honda City, Mother's Cupboard, and we are proud to be the exclusive multimedia marketing partner of the Lemoyne College Dolphins, the Bryan and Stratton College Bobcats of Syracuse, and the Binghamton University Bearcats. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy all of the games coming up Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, starting with women's basketball's Final Four happening tonight. God bless. No stress. Do your best. This is Wake Up Call. We appreciate you listening and watching, and we'll talk to you soon.